Hello there and welcome to a brand new episode of the SportsPro Podcast. My name is George Breare. I'm Head of Events Content here at SportsPro, and as always, I'm joined by my colleague and co-host, Mr. Tom Beahon, SportsPro's off-platform editor. But today we're joined by another Tom, Mr. Tom Beahon, CEO and co-founder of Castore. Tom, great to have you along with us.
Fantastic to be here, guys. Thank you for having me.
It's been a couple of years since we've had you on the SportsPro channels. I know you spoke at SportsPro Live a couple of years ago. I think it's fair to say a few things have changed since then.
Yeah, I've definitely got a few more grey hairs and wrinkles than I did back then, but hopefully for the right reasons.
So how's things been since we last caught up? It's an exciting journey that Castore's been on.
It is. It's a very exciting journey. I think we're lucky to operate in an incredibly exciting market. You guys know better than anyone, the sports landscape is one that's been through a period of, I don't think it's an overstatement to say, seismic change in probably the last 5 years or so. I think particularly since COVID was a catalyst that really accelerated a number of those changes that were already happening. And we, being an entrepreneurial business, have been able to pivot and capitalize on those. So if I think about the ongoing globalization of sport, the digitization of sport, the opportunity to better engage with, connect, and ultimately monetize fans, this is an incredibly exciting landscape. And beyond that, sports, and particularly my market, sports merchandising, sportswear, has not had a huge amount of new entrants, disruptors, challengers, innovators. It's been dominated. I'm 34 years old, really, by the same brands, certainly for my generation, as long as I can remember. And I think, as with any sector where you don't have new entrants or new challengers, there's a risk that things become a little bit complacent or stagnant. So we are really lucky to operate in the sector that we do. And hopefully we've done some quite exciting things in the last few years.
So it'd be good to go back. I know you were founded in 2015. As you say, the activewear market is one that's dominated by some big, household heavy hitting names for a very long time. But what was it that you saw in the apparel, the activewear market, in the sponsorship side as well, that you saw as being ripe for disruption and ready for a new entrant?
So there's two parts to that answer. And the first isn't really a good answer for a podcast, but it's true. It's just what we're passionate about. So I co-founded Castore with my brother. We both come from to my mind, very normal working class background in Merseyside. Don't have any entrepreneurial background in the family whatsoever. So there wasn't kind of anyone that we could look up to and ask questions about starting a business. So everything that we've done, we've learned on the job. And when we started Castore, the mindset was no more or less complex than we're going to work harder than anyone else. We're going to make more sacrifices than anyone else. We're going to be more committed than anyone else. We're just going to refuse to give up until we make this thing successful. We had no definition of what success would be, whether that was 100 million turnover, 1 million, a billion. Like, we didn't think, like, it was just, we're not going to stop until we make this thing a success. And the only way that you can follow through on that mindset and stick to it is if you are deeply and genuinely passionate about what you're doing. And the only thing that Phil and I are deeply and genuinely passionate about is sport. So that was really the genesis of Castore. I mean, my alarm goes off at 5 a.m. every day. My missus hates it. Not many people are awake at that time, but I love it. And the only reason I get out of bed 9 days out of 10 with a smile on my face is because I'm doing something that I genuinely love. The second reason, though, I guess kind of touches upon your question. Passion alone ain't going to get you very far in life. It'll get you somewhere, but it certainly doesn't get you to the point where you build the type of business that we have with Castore. As we started to apply a more analytical process or approach to that initial passion, we looked at the global sportswear landscape. You look at the secular long-term drivers of the market, people, consumers being more health and fitness and well-being focused, massively accelerated by COVID, where people really care about that, with flexible working, people dressing slightly different, dressing a bit more casually, and active wear, what I'm wearing today, lightweight chinos and a technical hoodie. You can go to meetings wearing this outfit in a way that you probably couldn't 10 or 15 years ago. So that, looking at the long-term drivers of the sector and really looking at the market and saying, this is far too big a market globally for it to be dominated by Nike and Adidas. that doesn't make sense to me. I didn't go to Harvard. I didn't go and speak to the founder of Nike or anyone like that about what they felt the opportunity was or wasn't, or how kind of what numerically that opportunity looked like. But it just intuitively, innately felt to us that there has to be space in this market globally for someone to build a premium alternative to those brands. So that was the idea behind Castore. I mean, we're from Merseyside. We're very proud to be a Northwest-based business. We were definitely inspired by Umbro, a very strong brand back in the 90s, was Northwest founded. Reebok, similarly, was founded in the Northwest. So the Northwest as a region does have a lot of kind of heritage in sportswear. And our mindset, maybe it was the naivety of youth, was, well, if we don't do it, who else will? We believe there's an opportunity here. Excuse my language. What's the worst that can happen? We didn't have anything to lose. Let's go and try and build something that we're really proud of. And that's what we tried to do.
Am I right in thinking that you got your startup funds from your parents remortgaging their house?
Yeah, so there was a couple of steps before that. So we'd had this idea. We both came from sports backgrounds originally, myself in football, Phil in cricket. Neither of us were good enough to make it at the highest level. So we had to go off and get what I kind of call the period in my life where I had a real job. So I worked in finance, not because I'm particularly passionate about finance. It was basically, where can I earn as much money as quickly as possible to help me start Castore? So I was in finance. My brother had a similar job. During that period, we knew that we wanted to start Castore. So we were kind of putting the ideas together, starting to write a business plan. I was convinced that I'd written one of the best business plans in the history of capitalism. But strangely, the rest of the world didn't agree with me. So we would go out and speak to these kind of angel investors, high net worth individuals, hustle to try and get these meetings and pitch this idea that we want to create a British sportswear brand, a premium brand that competes with Nike and Adidas and offers the market something different to those guys. With hindsight, not unsurprisingly, those investors didn't think that two young guys in their 20s with no experience had a huge chance of being successful competing with Nike and Adidas. So everyone said no. And that was a tough time. And it was during that period that our mum and dad said to us, well, we believe in you. They don't have a big house. They work very hard to pay off their mortgage, and they remortgaged that house, having worked for a long time to pay it off, to give us, I think it was like 30 odd grand, 40 odd grand, something like that, give us the funds to help us get Castore off the ground. And every entrepreneur is different. There's no singular route to success, but I can only speak from our personal experience. When something like that happens, when our parents did that for us, you basically say there's no way that this thing isn't going to be successful. Again, I don't know how far we're going to get. I don't know what the future looks like, but I'm not going to stop until we can pay them that money back. So yeah, they helped us out at the start, and thankfully it's all worked out okay.
I'm intrigued to know, when that funding comes in, what are sort of those initial early steps that, allow you to get the business off the ground? So in terms of the first samples, first going to market, what does that approach look like? And how can you essentially use that challenger brand mindset to do something different to the Adidas and the Nikes?
Firstly, you've just got to hustle. There's so many people that I speak to, I guess now that we've been lucky enough to have a decent level of success, that ask me like, oh, what did you do to start a business and how do you be successful? And almost they think that you're going to be able to tell them the answer and they're going to be able to apply that answer and be successful themselves. And I guess, as with anything in life, the reality is very different. You just have to hustle. You have to have that relentless, intensive, driven mindset where you're going to get so many knockbacks, so many challenges. There's so many difficulties and hardships that you go through, but you've got that tunnel vision that I'm just going to keep moving forward. I'm just going to keep this thing progressing. Like, I remember going to meet super, super successful people, both in the industry and outside, who I had no right to be in the room with. But if you're clearly and authentically passionate about what you're doing, it's amazing how people kind of align with that and want to help you and want to be part of your story. So the first part is there's no getting away from it. There's no shortcut. You just have to hustle. You have to work incredibly hard. You have to be so passionate about what you're doing. That is going to be the thing at the start, more than any business plan, more than any financing, more than anything else. That is going to be the singular thing that helps you get from 0 to 1. Beyond that passion, though, whilst it's so important alone, it isn't enough. You need to be laser focused on what makes you different. So back then, we didn't have any team partnerships. It was right at the beginning. And the singular thing we said is we have to be a premium alternative. We want to be the Tesla of the sportswear market. We want to be the Spotify. I always use the analogy of the automotive market. I want to be Range Rover. I don't want to be so premium that I'm Rolls Royce, where only 1% of people can ever afford to buy my product, but distinctly respected for high quality product engineering, performance, technicality. And if I'm laser focused on being a premium, high quality alternative to those guys, I've got a chance of being successful. So in the early days, it was all about really lasering in on what makes you different. Once you know that drives all of your decision making, how you build your website. We didn't have any money for marketing. All the money had gone on the first samples, but it drove where we're going to make that product. Is it in China or is it in Portugal? Well, if I'm going to be premium, it has to be in the best factories in the world. Where the fabric's going to come from, it has to come from Italy, the best fabrics in the world. How am I going to test it? I've got to go, we've called it tested beyond endurance, the commitment to marginal gains, those details that really make you stand out. Once you know what it is that makes you different, how you want to stand out from your competitors, that drives all of your decision making. And of course it evolves. And as our business has grown, that mindset will naturally need to evolve, kind of grow or die. If you're not kind of changing, you're standing still. But the fundamental North Star has never changed. We want to be a premium alternative to Nike and Adidas. We want to try and disrupt those guys. And that's really driven all of our decision making right from the beginning.
I think it's interesting you made the comparison to Spotify and Tesla, because to me, those two businesses are particularly interesting because they're tech-driven disruptions of quite traditional industries, right? So ones that were almost ready for the taking when it comes to tech. And same can really be said of Castore in the sense that you were able to start as a digital first business, direct to consumer, e-commerce led, as opposed to being constrained by bricks and mortar stores or, needing to appeal to the mass market. So how was that digital first approach an advantage when you're first starting, the opportunity to essentially reach people at mass scale, and B, when it comes to scaling that business down the line, how important has that digital first approach been? And was that really planned from the get-go?
The best way to start answering that is, what was it? Let me answer the last bit first. No, it wasn't planned from the get-go. I'd love to say that I'm Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. I mean, I could say that, but I'd be lying, unfortunately. So no, from the get-go, like I said, it was, I need to make enough money to pay off my mum and dad's mortgage. And until that, I can't think about anything else. And that mindset, I'll never lose that, just that wanting to get up before anyone else and work later than anyone else. Even if I could, even if I wanted to, I don't think I could change that. So no, it wasn't planned at the start, but very quickly we recognized that not just being digital first, but being data led would be a fundamental difference. If you look at the big guys, Nike and Adidas generate the lion's share of their revenues through third-party retailers. No problem in that. If you're doing $30 billion plus a year revenue as Nike are, you have to work with third-party retailers. There's simply no other way of physically getting that volume of product into the market without those guys. But again, I look at everything through a competitive lens. If I'm going to compete with them, if I'm going to offer consumers something different, I need to go and do something different to them. So not to say that third-party wholesale doesn't have a place in the product or the distribution mix, because it does. But we need to be digital first and data first. I need to understand my customers better than anyone else. I need to have a relationship with them that's richer and deeper and more integrated than anyone else have. You build over time by having that mindset, this virtuous flywheel where as you acquire more customers, the data points, the understanding that you have of them increases ever more. And as you get better at interpreting that data and building the data analytics team internally, which we've worked incredibly hard to do, you leverage that data better, you apply it to other parts of the business, and it is highly synergistic. It helps you grow the business, not just faster and in a more cost efficient way, but in a synergistic way where you're saying, if I know what that customer wants faster than Nike or Adidas do, I'm going to be able to win against them. So digital first has been core to the approach. Launching a website in Dubai or Australia or Japan is a hell of a lot easier than opening a physical store in those markets. You can absolutely do that as well. But digital has really helped us scale as quickly as we have. But it's what you do with that digital platform and understand the data that really allows you to stand out and compete.
Did it surprise you? Anything you learned there? So, I mean, it's the famous cliche, I guess, in startups that you think you know your customer until they buy from you. And then really all those assumptions get challenged. You have to pivot, change. Was it largely as you expected, that initial journey, or were there some fast changes that you need to make to sort of adjust to that customer?
100% the latter. We didn't really have any expectations because we were doing it all off the bat. We were learning as we go along. Again, the Silicon Valley mindset of move fast and break stuff. We 100% subscribe to that, which I do think works really well. Equally, sport is an inherently emotive, highly scrutinized market. So breaking stuff sounds lovely until you break stuff and you're like, oh, now I've got to fix it with a massive spotlight on me. So it sounds lovely in a textbook. In real life, it's a bit harder when your phone is ringing at 10 p.m. on a Friday night with a problem, but overall it absolutely is the right thing to do. But I think the most important thing is the philosophy. So building a culture. We're now kind of more than 500 people in the business, building a culture where those 500 people know that what I want from them as the founder, the co-founder, is to take risks, is to try new things, is to think outside the box. Yes, be led by the data, but use your intuition. Again, we're a challenger brand. We're a disruptor. We don't win by following anyone. We have to push the boundaries. We have to do things differently. If you can build a culture where there's 500 other people beyond me committed to that mindset, that's where really exciting things start to happen. People are led by the data, but they're making decisions, they're taking risks, they're being bold. That's where really exciting things happen.
With your approach to data, kind of which came first? Because I've heard you talk previously about Goldman Sachs Man. Was Goldman Sachs Man identified prior to your data? Or was that something that you're like, we're seeing this pattern in our customers, that means that we should therefore adapt our products to this person, and that person is Goldman Sachs Man?
I should be an ambassador for Goldman Sachs. I need to get paid. I give them so much free.
We can give them
so much free advertising. If there's anyone listening, I'm open to offers. But the Goldman Sachs analogy, that was in no way data led. So again, back to when we started the business, we had no marketing budget. We bought this stock, and no factory when you're a startup gives you anything on consignment. So you're paying up front for that stock, which is not great for cash flow. So all of the money had gone out, the stock comes in, and you're like, all right, I've got to sell this stuff now. And the mindset back then was, we want to have clear blue space between us and Nike and Adidas. So if they're talking to the mass market, we're going to talk to the exclusive high-end premium market. And the caricature that we built around that was the Goldman Sachs Man. We didn't do women's wear at that time, so it was men only. Again, only because we were two brothers and we thought there's marginally less chance of us this up if we're creating menswear than if we're doing women's wear as well. That has now since changed, and women's wear is one of the fastest growing parts of the brand. But the Goldman Sachs Man analogy was us with no data at that point before we started, saying this is a guy that is in the office 5 days a week at 7 a.m, but is in the gym 4 days a week at 6 a.m. with a personal trainer. I'm probably doing a triathlon or running a half marathon at the weekend. That is the person that goes on expensive holidays, drives a nice car, lives in a nice postcode. That person will pay a bit more for high quality sportswear, highly technical sportswear, and a more premium brand than Nike or Adidas. So that was the initial thesis that we had, that we could compete against the big guys. It worked really well. That Goldman Sachs type man, and there are others, JP Morgan, Rothschild, there's lots of other banks out there that were buying the brand. But what we found very early, and this is where the data started to lead the business, was that Goldman Sachs man, in inverted commas, would go to New York or Tokyo or Singapore or South Korea on business. They take their Castore kit with them. They'd go in the gym or they'd go for a run whilst they were on that business trip. And then we'd see an influx of orders from literally a 1 mile radius of that office that they were visiting. So very much grew by word of mouth, which was lucky because we didn't have any marketing budget at that time. But because we were digital, we would get data on all of those customers. We could track where these customers were buying from. You start to pick up the correlations, and then you start to refine your approach, your marketing, your product, your websites, where you open your distribution centers, led by the customer data that's flowing in. So very early on, we realized the value of data, and that's led our decision making ever since.
I want to move away from some of the data bits and talk a little bit about some of the big names that Castore have signed up, and in particular, probably one of the pioneering deals for you guys, which was with Andy Murray for the AMC range. Talk me through how that happened. I think e-commerce, certainly in the apparel space, has a very rich history of athlete investors and athlete endorsements, starting really with the Michael Jordan deal with Nike. So what was the thinking behind that, and sort of how did it come about?
It was a couple of years after we'd started the business, so we must have registered the company in 15, as you referenced at the start. We didn't launch until September 16, which I remember because it was after the Olympics. I think we did the deal with Andy in like 18, something like that. So we'd grown the business. I guess it was working in inverted commas. We were very unfashionable at the time in the sense that Phil and I were super focused on profit. And if we can kind of think back to 18, 19, 20, interest rates were zero. In vogue at the time was for kind of any direct-to-consumer brand would raise a load of venture capital investment. They'd pump that investment into Facebook and Instagram or Google marketing. They'd grow revenue. The unit economics wouldn't quite add up and they wouldn't be profitable, but that didn't matter because then they'd go into another kind of VC round 6 months later and onward it went. And we never subscribed to that. Again, probably because of the genesis of how we'd started the business and needing to be focused on profit, feeling that unless you generate profit and cash flow, you're not a real company. You're always kind of exposed and reliant on other people, which we never wanted to be. So we'd grown quickly, but organically. The customer that we hoped existed, that more premium, discerning, affluent consumer, had existed. We were able to acquire them. They would generally spend quite a lot of money. Average transaction value was high on the website because we were direct to consumer. Our margins were solid. And then we had really good reorder rates. Once they tried the product, they would generally come back. So it was a really solid, fundamentally robust brand at that point. But as with any entrepreneur, you're always thinking about what next. You've got that big vision in your head. Our vision was to create a premium British sportswear brand that competed on the global stage. And we realized that the only way that we could fulfill that dream and compete on the global stage was by having global athletes. I didn't subscribe to influencers. Like, I wanted authoritative, genuine athletes wearing my brand. The only way that we could become a global brand was by having global athletes wear us. So we didn't have a lot of money back then. So what we do is gift product to the people around athletes. We couldn't do teams. That was outside of our capability at that point. So we looked at individual sports. So like tennis and golf were the obvious ones for us. There was a couple of others, but we'd gift product to people around athletes that we thought were cool. The personal trainer, the masseur, the coach, the psychologist, all of these guys. I suppose it's back to this hustle mindset, basically just thinking that they're going to keep seeing this brand and think, what the hell is that? And that's exactly what happened with Andy. Kept seeing this brand. We'd given it to all the people around him. I'm a big believer in the old-fashioned saying of the harder you work, the luckier you get. And as luck would have it, Andy was coming to the end of his previous kind of kit partnership deal. He kept seeing this brand. He asked someone what it was. Someone said, it's this brand from Merseyside started by two brothers. I can't speak for Andy, but I think the fact that we're two brothers, obviously he and Jamie have been two brothers that started in Dunblane in Scotland and gone on to achieve kind of big, amazing things in their lives. So I think that resonated. And I was invited to go and meet Andy, which I still remember to this day, sat in the Champions Room at Wimbledon with all these amazing kind of pictures on the wall. And
he knows how to set a meeting, man.
You could put a gun to my head. I wouldn't be able to tell you what I said in that meeting, but whatever I said, Andy clearly resonated with him to a degree. And basically it became quite apparent quite quickly that there was a mutual interest, mutual values in terms of, like, I love Andy. I think he's the perfect example of our better never stops ethos, where through grit, determination, desire, resilience, as well as a huge amount of talent, of course, he's won 3 Grand Slams in an era of tennis where probably 3 of the best players of all time, Djokovic, Federer and Nadal, have been at their pinnacle. Of course, he's got his gold medals from the Olympics as well. On top of that, phenomenal success for me, a phenomenal inspiration. I think he's one of the greatest British athletes of all time. I felt he was the perfect embodiment of what we wanted to be, challenging the big guys. So I was like, we've got to find a way of making this work. So fortunately for us, Andy and his team were really open to being creative, and basically his market value was at a certain level. We couldn't reach that level. So the way that we bridged the gap was for him to become an investor in the business. Huge kudos for Andy for doing that. A lot of people wouldn't. And again, thankfully, it's worked out pretty well for everyone.
Well, I think that leads us into nicely if we're talking about investment, and we've covered, the journey from its inception, and actually getting it off the ground. But it's definitely felt as if the last 6 months have been a real watershed moment for the business. Speaking of investment, you've raised 100 plus million in October last year.
Yeah, that's right.
So tell me, what's that money being used for, and what's the sort of the scale up journey now for Castore?
You've got to start by taking a step back. The business had continued to grow really strongly, really organically. We were pretty reluctant to bring in too much or bring in outside investors unnecessarily, and certainly bring in institutional investors, because there's a lot of value that they add, but also we felt that our biggest USP was being entrepreneurial, was being a speedboat in a market of oil tankers, was having that Tesla, Spotify mindset, competing against the big guys, and that served us incredibly well. And when you bring on investment, you need to be realistic that is going to evolve and change things to an extent. So for us, it was really important to wait for the right timing to bring on investment. The big catalyst that drove that change was our decision to go into team sports. So like I say, we'd grown as a direct-to-consumer brand. We'd done partnerships with people like Andy and Adam Peaty and Josh Butler and Owen Farrell that had kind of further grown the brand, and things were going really well. And we realised that, but again, I suppose this entrepreneurial mindset of always looking for what's next, where can you add value, where can you innovate and disrupt? We looked at the market for team sports and felt that market is fundamentally broken. It's been dominated by the same brands for a generation, again, as we said earlier. But really, Nike and Adidas focus all of their resources on a very small number of teams at the very top of the sport: Barcelona, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, Manchester United. They'll really focus on supporting those guys well and not really focus on anyone outside of that elite. And as soon as you went and spoke to people in the market, that became abundantly clear. There was a lot of dissatisfaction. The teams that were very ambitious had huge, deeply passionate fan bases, often international, if not global fan bases. But the big brands with their multi-billion-dollar revenues just didn't deem them big enough, important enough, global enough for them to invest in. So we said there's got to be an opportunity here to do it better, to partner with those teams, to prioritize them first and foremost, try and create higher quality products, but really bring this digital first, data-led mindset to them, which I don't think it's controversial to say hadn't been massively prevalent in the industry before. With that mindset, we were able to partner with some amazing teams, help them grow their revenues, help them internationalize, help them connect better with fans, not just domestically, but internationally. And we worked out that model worked not just by growing the revenues for teams, which is fantastic in different sports, football, rugby, cricket, motorsport, but also it would help us grow the Castore brand, because you're getting this amazing brand visibility and awareness and volume of eyeballs, but it's giving your brand a stamp of approval, a credibility that is hard to replicate by traditional marketing. It's one thing for me to tell you on Facebook via an advert that my hoodie's great, but when you see someone wearing it, an elite athlete wearing it day in, day out, that gives it a stamp of approval. So the Castore brand growth accelerated. And it was at that point, once we'd proven that model, and it took us a while, it's a tough market, it's operationally very intense, but once we'd worked that out, we realised that, okay, there's a huge opportunity for us here, but in order to really capitalise on that opportunity and become a truly global brand, we need investment, we need more capital to allow us to invest strategically and invest for the long term.
That acceleration is kind of an embodiment of the move fast, break things, right? And it's fair to say that there are loads of great deals that have come through, but there's also been some challenging ones as well. So I know Aston Villa is probably the one that is most frequently cited. It's going to be part, right, of building a brand at scale and at speed, having partnerships like that. So what's the attitude internally to that, and sort of how have you do you take that on board as part of that entrepreneurial mindset to be like, that's fine, that happens, that's going to be part of it, and this is how we're going to overcome it?
You've got to have humility. So you've got to look yourself in the mirror, recognise where improvements can be made, and try your best to fix things, to make things better. That's not any kind of specific issue or challenge. That's just a mindset that you have to have. Sport, we're all of us so lucky to make a living in such an exciting sector. There's so many positive things about sport. One of the challenges is it's intensely scrutinized. You can't have the good without accepting those aspects as well. So I see it as a real positive in the sense that all of us, we all learn more from your setbacks or challenges than you do your runaway successes. Because when you're successful, you think, oh, brilliant, let's go and do more of that. You don't really stop to think about why and how and what can we do to improve. So you've got to have humility, the ability to look yourself in the mirror and fix things when there are problems and there are challenges. When you're disrupting huge multinational incumbent brands that are really happy with the status quo, it's inevitable that you're going to have challenges. So you can't let it blow you off course. You can't get too pent up by it. You just have to be really rational and logical in how you go about and fix things. Equally, the challenges that we have, which we do have challenges, the big brands have exactly the same challenges. The difference is when you're a challenger brand, everyone likes putting them out to you. And it does give me a wry smile that whenever we're lucky enough to have positive press, we do get a good amount of positive press. No one sends it to me. As soon as you get some challenging press, everyone I've ever met loves forwarding it on to me on WhatsApp and saying, just checking you've seen this, mate. So it's just par for the course. You've got to learn from it. These challenges will always make you better. Equally, you can't let it get to you in a big way because these things happen when you're operating in a market that we are.
When you've positioned yourself in that kind of premium sportswear space though, and you get the challenges like you had with Villa and like some of the headlines weren't particularly flattering about what the kind of the quality of the products were, like does that give you a knock when you go into that next negotiation, or is it literally a case of the people inside the industry know what this is, know what the deal is, know how these challenges occur?
You've hit the nail on the head with the latter. So anyone in the industry knows how this industry works. The reason that Castore has been able to have the success that we have and kind of raise the money that we have and got to the valuation that we have and the revenue growth that we've had is because the market wasn't working. So all of the clubs, or many of the clubs that we've partnered with, were dissatisfied with the status quo. We've managed to fill a gap and deal with that level of dissatisfaction. So everyone that I speak to in the industry, again, you've got to have humility. You can't try and bullshit and say, oh no, it wasn't a problem, it's all made up. You have to fix problems where problems arise. But people in the industry understand that these problems are inevitable when you're dealing with hundreds of thousands of units and elite athletes working in different climates and temperatures and humidities and all the rest of it. So as long as you deal with these things in the right way, people that understand the industry are really understanding and accepting of that. Probably kind of similarly to, as I said earlier, about when you're starting out, if people can see that you're passionate about what you're doing, they want to give you the benefit of the doubt. It's very similar here.
I'm not expecting you to break any news here, but from next season, right, you lose Newcastle and Villa to Adidas. I don't know if the Villa one's been fully confirmed yet. Does that mean you're going to be going back out into looking at like the other Premier League clubs that are coming onto the market? Or have you kind of tested the water with the Premier League and maybe taken a step back from it?
No, I think we want to partner with people where we genuinely believe we can add value. If you have the success that we've had, you'd be naive to think that the big brands are not going to react. So we know that we've been on Adidas in particular, like Nike are the runaway leaders. They're the kings of the market and have been for a long time. Adidas are an interesting one, I think, because psychologically they were the number one in the market. They had a multi-decade start on Nike and have been completely dominated by Nike. So I think for Adidas, they look down a lot more than they look up at Nike. They almost see it as an impossible task to challenge Nike. So they've kind of stopped trying. I don't know if that's right or wrong. I'm not the CEO of Adidas. Nike don't look down at anyone else. They only look into the future. That's why they lead the market. They're more innovative than Adidas. They've had the success that they've had. But for Castore, when you disrupt a market as we have and you break a status quo and you try and be innovative and disruptive and different, it would be silly to not think that you're going to get pushback. So that doesn't put me off. That isn't a challenge that I find overtly difficult. I love the competitiveness, the fact that Adidas are thinking about Castore. If you'd said that to me 7 years ago when my mum remortgaged the house, I would have thought you were crazy. So we know that we're making a positive impact in this market. We're offering clubs something that is different. Volkswagen don't like Tesla. You wouldn't expect them to. Adidas don't like us. I wouldn't expect them to. I can live with that. I want to create great products, build a great brand, try and add value to teams. And there's no doubt in my mind that we're going to be able to continue to do that next season and for many seasons to come.
Any hints on with who?
I'd love to give you guys an exclusive, but I'd get told off if I did that. So
Tom's journalist nose coming through.
we've got a few interesting things in the pipeline. We're not bored at Castore, that's for sure.
The partnerships that Tom referenced, that's quite product focused as well. But one of the interesting and differentiating parts of Castore is the sort of the vertical partnership model. So can you talk me through, and for our listeners who might not understand what that is, exactly what the nature of a vertical partnership model is, and why that gives you a bit of a competitive advantage compared to some of the big dogs you talked about earlier?
Yeah, so the market historically had been very, as I said, wholesale led, in the brand would manufacture the product, they'd then sell it into the wholesale market, the retailer or the club, and the club or the retailer would then sell that product onto the fan. So there was 3 parties to the relationship: the brand, the club, and the retailer. You don't need to have gone to Oxford and have a degree in advanced mathematics to know that if you can take 3 parties and merge them into 2 parties, that's more margin for those 2 parties to share. So what we recognised, we'd built Castore for about 5 years. At this point, we'd built a global supply chain, a global distribution network, and a global technology platform. We recognised that we could leverage that infrastructure and apply it to sports, whereby we would partner with teams, but rather than just pay to have our logo on the chest and sell the product into retailers at a wholesale margin, we could operate the website, we could sell that product directly to the fan. In the process, you fundamentally changed the margin dynamics, the economics in those partnerships. But most importantly, you have that direct data coming in. You can understand what buying habits are like. You can understand what fan behavior is like. And over time, you can build a model that is better geared towards servicing those fans. So it's not just financially more attractive. There's more margin to share, which the club benefits from, particularly very topical at the moment in an age where financial fair play is being implemented in a way that I don't think it ever has before. If you can offer a club something that is more financially attractive, that's going to be really appealing to them. Beyond that, though, and I would argue even more importantly, if you can show the club that data is being understood, analysed in a way that it never has before, and you can share that feedback with them, that is going to add value way beyond the specific sphere of the kit partnership. So being focused on data and sharing that with the club and understanding the learnings that come from how fans interact, not just domestically, but globally, that's where the real value is in this.
Moving from the sponsorship to the partnership realm, we talk about this all the time when it comes to sponsors and branding in particular, that it's not really good enough anymore just to slap a logo on a sports property these days and expect the results. But how deeply embedded do you find your data analytics teams, your digital teams with the clubs that you're working with as almost a synergistic department, so that not only can that deliver results now and strong financial results, strong engagement results, but actually when it comes to those renewal conversations, it's really easy because you're almost negotiating with your own team in a sense.
The key to all of this is that you fundamentally change the dynamic whereby you go from being a sponsor to a partner. It sounds like a really simple change, but that's such a fundamental change. You're sharing data, you're sharing information, you're sharing skill sets and personnel and knowledge. It's a very, very big change from how the market has worked historically. I wouldn't say there's any singular catch-all answer to that. We operate in football, rugby, cricket, Formula One, more broadly different motorsport categories. It really depends on the sport and the team as to how integrated we become, where that team is on in terms of their own journey, in terms of how they want to understand data and what they do with that. But there's no doubt whatsoever in my mind that this is a one-way direction of travel. All teams across the sporting pyramid, across the different categories, across different geographies, are all moving in one direction, which is you have to understand your fan better than anyone else. You have to have that direct relationship. You have to own that data that comes through these partnerships.
With that model, it's kind of similar to Fanatics, but minus the licensing element. Is that a kind of other way of putting it? In that they run the e-commerce for a store or a team or a league, but they license the branding from whoever the rights holders partners are. But therefore, it increases that profit margin. Is that then what goes into? So you see a top level price for a deal. Was that all priced into that agreement? So if we saw, I don't know, I can't remember what the figure was for Rangers. It might have been like £20 million was like the reported fee. But is that all priced into that overall value when it comes out at the other end?
I'd love to see where these numbers come from that get reported often, because I think I'm yet to see one that's accurate. But Fanatics, to my mind, and they're a good business in many ways, and particularly in the US. But where we're different from Fanatics is that we manufacture the product ourselves. We're a brand. So the value that I'm receiving from a partnership with Rangers, to use your example, I'm getting my logo on the chest every time they kind of play on Sky Sports or they're in the Europa League. I'm selling more Castore t-shirts and hoodies off the back of that partnership. That is incredibly valuable to me. There's huge growth potential for Castore as a brand, and these partnerships are a vehicle that help me drive that growth. So I can look at these partnerships economically in a very different way than someone like a Fanatics can, where they're just a platform. In addition to that, Fanatics need to work with either a Castore or a Nike or an Adidas who are manufacturing the product, who sell it to them. The club needs to earn a margin on whatever they're selling, which again, 3 parties rather than 2 means that the margin is being diluted. So I guess the principle is the same. We're all thinking about doing the same things. How do you digitize kind of these revenue streams? How do you better engage with and connect directly with fans, and the opportunities that will open up? But we are thinking about it in a slightly different way. And I think I'm right in saying that Castore is the only truly vertically integrated model in this market, which is a big reason that we've had the success that we have.
Speaking of that vertical integration partnership, a big chunk of that investment that you received in November was to grow in new geographical markets as well. Can you give us an insight into which of those that you're targeting and why?
Yeah, so again, this comes back to the genesis of Castore being a digital brand. We've now got 8 years of data. I'm just going to sound really boring here on, I keep using that word, but it is the reality, telling us where our customers are. This is not we like the idea of South America, so let's go over there. We have data that tells us where our customers are. So you start to utilize that and think, okay, well, where are markets where we know people like the brand? You then overlay that with maybe the more qualitative things that are happening, and using your entrepreneurial intuition and say, the Middle East looks like a really interesting market. We know that we sell a lot of product in the Middle East already for Castore. You look at what's going on in Saudi, the investments that are being made in infrastructure, in places like Qatar and the UAE, the long-term focus that politicians have over there on driving sports, on making it part of their economies, on getting their local residents more kind of healthy and focused on sports. You don't need to be a rocket scientist to think maybe that's an interesting place for us to be. So the Saudi Premier League being the most obvious example, these things all go on their own growth trajectories, and no one in the world knows exactly how these growth trajectories will play out. But we will take a view on where we think Castore can add value, which markets are ripe for digital disruption, where there's going to be ever-growing focus on the sports that we're interested in. So the Middle East is definitely an interesting market for us. Australia has always been a fantastic market, and one that I think the big brands have historically overlooked. The Far East, places like China and Japan and South Korea are very interesting. Equally, it's very easy to say those words. Each of those markets have their local nuances. So working out how you build a business and execute a business plan in those markets is where the challenge is. And we need to be, or my big focus is on making sure that we're disciplined. We absolutely have the ambition for Castore to be a global brand, but we need to be disciplined in how we execute against that strategy.
So is it fair to say the Middle East is the primary focus for now? Purely from a customer acquisition side, or is there also interest in investor partners from there?
Investor partners, I guess what the old-fashioned saying of the best time to fix a roof is when the sun is shining. Currently, the best time to raise money is when you least need it. So we're not actively in the market to raise funds at the moment. Equally, we met a lot of people through the fundraising that we closed last year that I'll keep in touch with. And you never know what the future holds. If you're an ambitious business, you're always on the lookout for the next partner. That's the nature of how we operate. So again, clearly the sovereign wealth funds in the Middle East have put a huge amount of money to work in recent years as they diversify their economies away from fossil fuels. Sport and tourism clearly will play a big role in that. So is there a place for Castore within those macro trends and within that ecosystem? I think that's a really interesting question that I'm interested to work out the answer to in the years ahead. So the Middle East is definitely interesting. Equally, and I'm 34 years old, a lot of stuff I'm working out as I go along to a degree and using intuition. There was a time where Russia was the future and everyone talked about Russia. There was a time where China was the future and everyone talked about China. These things do move in cycles. My job is to make sure that we're at the forefront of the next cycle, not doing what everyone else is talking about.
One thing I'd like to go into actually, rather than like territories, is sports verticals. Probably the biggest news coming out of the sportswear sector in the first part of January was that Tiger Woods splitting from Nike in golf. There's kind of whispers that that might be part of a bigger pullout of golf. I mean, they no longer make clubs, which they stopped doing several years ago. I know you guys had deals with Matt Fitzpatrick and Patrick Reed, but is that something, and with your kind of like premium sportswear positioning, is that somewhere that you would look to go back into in a bigger way if Nike were and others were to pull out?
We love golf. Golf's a fantastic category for us, but something that's really important to understand about golf is that the customer generally purchases physically rather than digitally. So anyone who's a golfer will know that if you're care enough about golf that you're a member of your local club, every club has a pro shop. So there is product available in that club shop. And players like to support their local club shop, so they'll buy that product physically, which again, there's a lot of people that are very good at third-party retail. Our expertise is digital. Golfers do tend to buy slightly differently. That doesn't mean that it's not a market that we can go after. It absolutely is. And it's one that we do really, really well in and we really like. But compared to other sports, tennis being one, paddle clearly very nascent, but growing incredibly quickly, the consumer, the customer demographic of those sports is slightly different than golf. So I guess, as I said, with geographies, they all have their different nuances. Sports verticals also have their different nuances that you need to navigate.
Looking at those verticals, I know Castore's has also opened its bricks and mortar stores now. So what was the sort of the rationale there? And is that an important vertical that is going to continue to grow? And secondly, talking about Tom's example there with golf and Nike pulling out of building equipment, is equipment a vertical that you're looking to move into?
Yeah, both really interesting. So stores, absolutely, yes. We really like stores. We will absolutely open more stores. I think when you expand internationally, which is very much one of our big priorities strategically, opening a physical store in that market is a real indication of intent. Customers can go on your website, and it's important to have local languages, local currencies, a distribution center set up so that you can service that market seamlessly. They're significant investments and it's really important to have that. But a physical store where someone can come in, experience your brand, can touch and feel and try on the product, that offers a consumer something that no matter how good your website is or how interactive it is, it cannot replicate that. So we really like stores, particularly when we're entering new markets, and that doing the two combined, launching a localized website, a localized marketing campaign, but augmenting it with a physical store opening, it is a strategy that's worked very well for us and I hope and expect will do going forward. So stores, we absolutely do like. Equipment, I would very much put in that category of balance between ambition and discipline. So is there scope for us to look at equipment? Yes, I think there is. Is that one of the low-hanging fruit before, if I'm thinking about building a global brand, is doing equipment going to be the thing that gets me there? I'm not sure it is in the short term. So it's always a balance that I think any entrepreneur kind of constantly grapples with. Everything that you get excited about and you want to do, and particularly for Castore, we're growing quickly, we're profitable, we're cash generative, we've raised money there's a risk that you spread yourself too thin and you try and do too much. So we want to create the best sportswear in the world. We want to partner with great teams and help them unlock value. And ultimately, we want to be a British sportswear brand competing on the global stage. I'm not sure equipment helps me achieve those things in the short term, medium term, let's say.
You talk about those getting excited about conflicting ideas. And what's the dynamic like with your brother there? I mean, is there one of you that's sort of throwing out let's do this, let's do this, let's do this, and the other one reining it back in? Or are you sort of both singing from similar hymn sheets a lot of the time?
We're both quite similar, but at risk of contradicting myself, also different in some pretty fundamental ways as well. So I guess the benefit of being brothers, and there's quite a few examples, I think, in business where brothers or sisters have created something and been really successful. I think the benefit that you have is that implicit trust, which is so important. Whenever there's a big decision, you can have a really robust, tough conversation about it, knowing that you're not going to fall out. You can be super honest. You're going to be brothers at the end of the day, whatever happens. So having that implicit trust, I think, is incredibly valuable. You might disagree as you're going through the debate, but once a decision's made, there's no you or me. It's just we've made the decision. We need to make it a success. So I think that's really powerful. And then Phil and I are just incredibly lucky that we've got very different skill sets. Like, I enjoy being out in the world, meeting people,
doing podcasts.
No, the slightly tongue-in-cheek way that we describe it is, it's my job to bring revenue into the business, and it's Phil's job to turn that revenue into profit and cash flow. So his skill set, and I think what he enjoys, is being operationally, logistically, systems, technology, supply chain, those things. Whereas if I'm in the office for 2 days on the bounce, I start to get itchy feet. I need to be out in the market, meeting people, working out opportunities that we can do something that other people are not doing. So hopefully between us, we cover more bases certainly than we would individually, that's for sure.
I want to finish with looking ahead to the future. I know that the investment round valued Castore at nearly £1 billion. What does the dream look like for you, for Castore? Is it an IPO? Is it, continued growth in that disciplined way that you've mentioned? What's the end game?
I mean, the IPO one is, I get asked that question all the time, and I just think it's difficult as an entrepreneur and the founder of a business to be excited about the prospect of an IPO. If you look at valuations for FTSE 100, 250 AIM companies, they're way below their American peers. They're often way below their Asian peers. So you're not getting a valuation benefit from that. And you have to put up with a huge amount of challenge in the form of governance. And if you're reporting numbers quarterly, I completely understand why investors need that, but it makes it a lot harder for a founder to make long-term decisions. And I think one of Castore's core competitive advantages is that we can make long-term decisions. If I think that whether it's a geographic market or a technology or a way of interacting with fans or a product vertical is really exciting, but it might take me 2, 3, 4 years to bring that to fruition and for it to pay off, I can do that now. I'm not sure I would be able to do it if we were a publicly listed company where the risk is that you only focus on short term, I call it sugar rush, the things that give you a buzz in the short term, but might not be the right thing in the long term. So, I mean, never say never, but IPO is just one that I struggle to get excited about. People often talk to me about, when the big brands just try and buy you out of the market. And again, I just struggle to see that that's the end of this story. I don't see that being the direction that we ever go in, where my brother and I have literally put blood, sweat and tears into making Castore what it is today. We've still got so much room still for growth. I truly, at risk of sounding cliched, but truly believe that we're only just finding our feet and working out how we can really create value for customers and fans and teams and build a global brand. And I'm still so excited to wake up every day. So I know that we can continue to grow. The ambition hasn't changed from the start, which is to be a global brand. I love brands like McLaren, Burberry and Bentley, the British champions that are truly global. Like, that's what I want Castore to be. And I don't care how long it takes me to get there. I'm not going to stop. We always say better never stops. That's our brand maxim. That's our DNA. I'm not going to stop until we get there. So there isn't an end as far as I'm concerned. There's nothing else I'd rather be doing. The question is, what is the best way for us to to get as far as we can, whether that's taking investment from sovereign wealth, different private equity from different parts of the world. Hopefully, if I build or we build a great business, there's going to be plenty of options out there for us. We'll deal with them when we get to them. If you're focused on the inputs rather than the outputs, you generally can't go wrong in life.
If there was one big property rights holder sport that you could tomorrow go and do a handshake deal with and you're going to be the new supplier for that thing, what would it be? Just being absolutely hypothetical. This doesn't have to be in any way realistic, for the immediate term anyway.
It's a great question, and it's the exact question that I would ask if I was a journalist, but you'll have to forgive me for pleading the fifth on that one, because there's no way of me answering that without it creating headlines that I probably don't really want to create. So I guess in all seriousness, we're so lucky that we now have a platform and we have a brand that legitimately can go and have conversations with some of the best teams in the world. That doesn't mean you're going to win everything that you want to win. This is a competitive market. I love that. Bring it on. I want to be competing with the big guys. So I think I can offer teams, and I think I can offer customers something that Nike and Adidas cannot. Is the sports market and the sportswear market better for Castore challenging a Nike than Adidas? I think that unequivocally it absolutely is. So as long as I can keep adding value, hopefully there's going to be a lot of exciting things still to come for Castore.
Well, we look forward to tracking the journey. Tom, thank you very much for taking time out of the schedule to come and chat to us, and hopefully not the last time.
Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me. Enjoyed it.
Thanks, guys.